So thanks, Kate, for your time today. It's good to see you again. And from being on our TVs very much in the last few months over the campaign trail. One of the reasons we wanted to talk to you today is because in our mind, this weekend we're celebrating mothers and babies, and you're probably the most high-profile mammy in the country. Would you agree with that, perhaps?
I think it's certainly the most vocal mummy in the country, reflecting probably the fact that I have a very vocal little 15-month-old girl who's growing up very fast, increasingly naughty, and as I often joke, looks like her father, takes after her mother, which is the worst of both worlds.
I wouldn't agree with that, for your husband's sake as well. But going back to the birth of Naomi, you were very upfront in recent months about your struggles with postnatal depression. We were quite moved by your honesty about that. But is that the fact it was a news story, does that not still indicate there's a stigma around postnatal depression?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to be upfront about it was that whilst I was experiencing it, I was really taken aback by the fact that so many other mothers I spoke to could identify. And yet it was such a shock to me, which suggests that there is very little public discussion about it. And it shouldn't come as a surprise to a lot of new mothers. But the other thing is that I wanted to sort of pay credit to those that are on the front line of helping new mums with these issues. And I really can't cope almost listening to the experiences of mothers across the world who don't have the same level of healthcare that we do, and so on, and yet have to grapple with these issues, not least in the Middle East right now. So I really felt a desire to talk about it, to elevate it, I guess, out of the shadows, and perhaps start a broader debate about what we need to do to support new mums.
Of course, what makes it more remarkable is the fact that just a few months after that, we've got the sudden resignation of Nicola Sturgeon. You decide to throw your hat in the ring for the leadership of the SNP and First Minister. What was that like to decide on entering that campaign, given all that happened?
Well, on one hand, it felt like it was the wrong time to be going for a big contest like that. And yet I think actually my earlier experiences had completely prepared me for it. It had certainly crystallised for me what is really important in life and what's less important. So, as you know, I created, perhaps to put it mildly, a bit of a stir in the early days of that campaign. But I guess coming out of that experience, it felt so important to throw my hat in the ring and to actually try and deliver a better future for everybody, but particularly the next generation. I felt like I had a personal stake in a better Scotland, and therefore a responsibility to do something about it. So, and then it also crystallised for me the importance of being honest, of being truthful, of not winning a contest on the basis of hiding my views, but being open and upfront. And I think those early experiences certainly did, for me, to use that phrase again, crystallise just how critical it was to go for it, but to go for it in a way that was honest and truthful.
Yeah, we'll discuss later on more the specifics of the kind of ferocity of the campaign and the experience, but just before that, it's worth reflecting on the fact that pregnancy is a protected characteristic. You being a pregnant professional at that time, before the campaign, do you think there needs to be more done in law to take away some of the discrimination that maybe pregnant women face in the workplace or in society?
100%. I was doing quite a high-profile, quite time-intensive job. I mean, I spent so much time travelling the length and breadth of the country, extremely pregnant. I didn't stop work until maybe 48 hours before I actually gave birth, and I gave birth a week late. So I was already into borrowed time and still working. And when it came to maternity leave, I was really keen to set a standard for what perhaps future women in my position would be expected to take. I didn't want it just to be sort of a couple of weeks. I wanted it to be a proper period of maternity leave. And I think that I found a lot of people that I was working with were really understanding, and a lot were just less understanding. I mean, doing factory tours as the economy secretary and not being able to sit down for 4 hours is pretty hard going when you're pregnant. And I've been very conscious of the health of my unborn baby as well. So I think on one hand it's understanding, on the other hand it's legislative protections, but ultimately I think it's the extent to which society reflects its value of the baby. We are facing demographic challenges, we're wanting to improve equality protections for women, and all of that comes down to how we also support the unborn child.
Of course, just on that point, you mentioned about the demographic challenges in Scotland. We are facing a very low fertility rate. How would you envisage the government, the Scottish Government, could help boost or encourage families to have more children and grow family life?
Well, having tested being a working pregnant mother, I think that it comes down to, first of all, the employment protections of women, and things like being able to get time off to go for hospital appointments, time off to go in order to rest if that's required. I think we need to have stronger employment protections for pregnant women. And I think, secondly, we also need to be able to demonstrate, almost model, the fact that it is possible to be in work or whatever and have a baby. That you don't need to wait perhaps until you're at the top of your career because you're so scared that there will be implications of being pregnant. So I think that that's the other thing I sought to achieve, is that modelling of it. But thirdly and lastly, I've never had a better job. I love having a baby and watching her grow and watching her develop. And I'm so grateful that in this line of work I was afforded the opportunity to have a baby and to take maternity leave and then come back to work.
That's wonderful. One of the things we're raising the awareness for SPUC and their campaigns. One of the things they do, which is wonderful actually, is something called the Alma Mater Fund, which is basically there's pregnant and parenting students at university who find themselves in a crisis pregnancy, unwanted pregnancy for speaking sake, and they feel that they can't continue their degree. So what the Alma Mater Fund does is it gives them the support, signposts them, gives them some sort of small grants as well. So that kind of touches upon the idea, and that's one of the things we're promoting this weekend. So I don't know if that's something you know about or maybe are interested to hear more about, but that's kind of struck in my mind there when you mentioned the fact that we need to help people in work, but also students as well who maybe have ambitions to study, but also have found themselves in potential motherhood.
I wasn't aware of that fund, but I think that it's so essential that we support mothers. We absolutely need to support mothers.
Yeah. So going back to the campaign, it's nearly a year now, I can't believe it already. We as Catholics, Sancta Familia, a Catholic media organisation, you're not a Catholic yourself, you're a member of the Free Church of Scotland, but we share so many of the core beliefs. So when you stood up for yourself to be First Minister and head of the SNP, it gave us a great shot in the arm as Catholics in this country who very often feel that holding traditional views about your faith, deeply held views, sincerely held views, somehow precludes you from being elected or standing up in a public office. Were you surprised by the backlash you got initially from colleagues, the media, about the fact that you're a member of the Free Church of Scotland?
No. Very predictable and not very newsworthy. What I think was remarkable was the backlash to the backlash. So what are the chances, when did it last happen, that you would have had unity across people of a Muslim faith, a Catholic faith, a Protestant faith, of no faith, humanists, secularists, feminists, all united around the notion that conscience should play a part in our politics, and that today it might be, for example, people expressing concern about my views, and tomorrow it might be something else, and that actually a liberal democracy can only operate when we stand by those freedoms of speech, of religious practice, of religious view, and so on and so forth. So actually, what I found remarkable and hugely heartening was the backlash to the backlash. And I think there was quite a lot of people that were surprised that I got 48% of the vote amongst SNP members, and interestingly, generally retained a lead when it came to public polling across Labour voters, Tory voters, SNP voters. And I think that's the big surprise, and hopefully is a source of encouragement to those that feel like the public square is an increasingly fearful place.
Well, it was a great shot in the arm for us. So on behalf of us Catholics, thanks for standing and speaking up so boldly on those topics. One of the things you mentioned there is free speech. For us Catholics, we have a very strong commitment to helping women who find themselves in crisis pregnancies, unborn children, and that very often manifests itself in every Lent. There are occasionally prayer vigils held outside hospitals in Scotland. I know there's a kind of several groups who are against that for various reasons, and there's a bill coming up in Parliament here for proposed buffer zones. One of the concerns that us Catholics have is that it's been implemented in the UK previously in smaller areas, and it's led to the arrest of individuals for simply standing outside an abortion clinic or a hospital and being accused or arrested on the thoughts that's in their own head. Now, let me be very clear, we do not stand for intimidation, harassment, and there's certainly been no evidence of that, video evidence, recorded evidence, police evidence of that. So do you really think then that this is a necessary bill?
Well, the bill is currently, as I understand it, in the Health Committee. So it's really important that every piece of legislation, including a bill like this that touches on so many of our enshrined freedoms, that it is properly scrutinised, and that the committee and then the Parliament take the broadest number and diversity of views on the bill. I think there are some really important points here. Firstly, I do not think that you can ban prayer. So I think that silent prayer is essential, and that is an important freedom to uphold. I think also, though, you cannot protect harassment and antisocial behaviour. So that should be banned. And I think this bill has got to get the right balance, because, of course, in some of these clinics, people are going for a whole host of different reasons. And it's important to protect their freedom to access that care, as well as protect the freedom of those to pray in a peaceful way. So often legislation in this Parliament boils down to binary options of yes or no, being in support or against. I think this bill is going to have to work really, really hard, listening to a broad number of views in order to ensure that it is a product of a liberal society and not an illiberal society.
Absolutely agree on that point. I think we're seeing increasing pushes now to silence, not just this topics, but other kind of faith topics as well, to the periphery. So we're hoping that if any particular bill comes in, it won't do that and particularly penalise people of faith. In particular, regarding to laws protecting women, and one of the things that was quite interesting recently and very sad was the case of the woman who was sadly killed not far from here, Fazia Javed, she was called. There was no additional charges for the death of the 17-week unborn child that she was carrying at the time she was killed. Do you think that the law is sufficient to protect women and their unborn children, and is there any scope for better protections?
Well, I don't know enough about that particular case to comment on the legal arguments, but what I have noticed, and I think is absolutely right, is an increasing push for recognition of the untimely deaths of unborn babies. And we've recently seen, for example, the introduction of ways of recognising babies that have died through miscarriage, and the absolute sort of anguish of parents who want to recognise that baby's life. And I think, therefore, it's an interesting question as to how the law can reflect that anguish. I mean, seeing some of the newspaper coverage of the anguish of grandparents in that case, and wanting to acknowledge that there was a baby there was a life there, and that the death of the mother led to the death of that baby. So without commenting on the legal specifics, I do think that there is a desire to recognise in greater sort of substance the untimely deaths of those babies.
And finally, looking towards the future, in recent months, the SNP, you could say, has been a bit of a hot water with regards to some defections from the party. You've got Ash Regan, who's defected to Alba. You've had Lisa Cameron, who's defected to the Tories. Do you still think the SNP is the right party to lead Scotland forward? And if so, do you still harbour ambitions in the future to be potentially a future leader for the SNP?
Well, you heard it here first. I ain't going anywhere. I'm here to stay. Because I do think that the SNP still can be the national party of Scotland. It's the Scottish National Party, a party that reflects all of our communities, including faith communities, and is able to have a debate and a diversity of views reflecting all these different communities, whether they're in the Highlands or in the Central Belt or in our islands or in the Northeast. But we need to strive to protect that. And I certainly see I have a responsibility to do that. So for as long as I am a member of the SNP, I want to be a voice for perhaps the voices that aren't heard as often in the SNP, and hopefully give that hope to communities that sometimes feel more distance from our national parliament. So yes, in terms of the future, I have said that on one hand I have no desire, no appetite, no ambitions to stand, and the only reason I don't rule it out is that you can never predict the future. But for now, I'm very content with the job that I have, which is being on the backbenches, representing my constituents, but representing those diverse voices in a way that I hope is sort of conducive to a proper debate. So not just saying it's my way or the highway, but actually engaging in discussion, and that sometimes means compromise as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kate Forbes, for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.